record the webinar. So again, thank you very much for joining us, and let's kick off. I'd just like to go quickly through the agenda. It seems like a very busy agenda, but don't worry, it's not death by PowerPoint. And typically these webinars, even though we schedule them for 1 hour, they typically go on for about 30 to 35 minutes. So hopefully be able to give you some time back to hopefully enjoy the sunshine if it's sunny where you are today. So we're going to talk about why anything. Why is it essential to look at information and data security? But there is an impact if that data or information is actually breached. And what is that actually impact to you as a business? I want to talk about the different changes and the way information security risks have changed, especially around sort of pandemic, but also other areas. It's not just necessarily about the pandemic. We'll talk about the different options. Obviously, I'll drill down into a little bit more detail as per the sort of requests that we got from the previous webinars we've ran, but also talk about other options. ISO 27001 is not the only sort of option out there for you. Talk about why now. Why is it important to look at information and data security? Not just necessarily from, like I said, a pandemic point of view or increased cyber threats, but why now? Why look at information and data security now? Then obviously I want to talk about why IMSM and our sort of skill sets, and then just a quick summary, and then we'll open it up to a Q&A session. So why anything? I suppose it's pretty simple. Businesses depend absolutely on the information that they have within their business. And if it's threatened, compromised, or people can't get access to it, the right people getting access to it at the right time, then it becomes very difficult for businesses to make decisions, and they're almost impossible. And it's becoming harder and harder to protect. Like when I first started in business many, many years ago, you know, our idea of information and data security was just making sure the filing cabinet was locked, because all of our data, our information was actually on site. It wasn't with our suppliers, with our customers. We weren't really sharing that type of information. So that made it really easy to protect that data, to decide who could have access to it at what time, because it was simply controlled via a key, and you had to go to the key holder to get access to that information. And the only threats really against that data and that information were from, you know, potential break-ins or fire and theft. So we took backup copies and stored them in fire safes, etc. And that was our whole information and data security policies and procedures were all based around that physical asset of data. But it's become harder and harder to protect as we move into extended ecosystems, working with suppliers and partners. So now it's time to actually look at doing that. Now, obviously, we're still in the midst, unfortunately, of a global pandemic, but it's not just the pandemic that's causing problems and causing more information to be actually generated by businesses. You know, as I said a few moments ago, we work in this extended ecosystem. We outsource business processes, whether that be to a marketing company, finance services, business partners. We work in this extended ecosystem, sharing information with them. Digital transformation has had a huge effect. People have looked to digitize their standard paper-based systems and move more into an electronic way of working. And that's generated more information, more data, again, needs to be protected. One of my sort of pet topics is IoT. You know, the amount of devices that are now connected to some form of network or computer system, whether that be a connected city, you know, driverless cars, even down to, I've done a project with a company that was producing IoT devices, Internet of Things, connecting vending machines. So they could monitor when they actually needed repairing or the amount of throughput that was coming through them rather than sending staff out to actually check on them. And that was generating more and more information that needs to be protected. And obviously businesses have evolved massively over the last 12 months. And it means that where their information is stored, the threats to that information is changing all the time. You know, obviously, one of the new challenges is this global working from home, where the vast majority of people have had to work from home. Obviously, there are areas of industry where people can't work from home in some of the manufacturing sectors, but a vast proportion of the UK and certainly globally have now started to work from home, started to print things, started to have information that's in their house rather than in a secure building. And those have thrown up more challenges around how do you protect them. Obviously, there's the governance element, GDPR being one of the big ones, where I'll talk a little bit later on about some of the impact of breaches to GDPR. But obviously compliance, making sure you meet the required standards for your industry, for your customers, for your suppliers, for your stakeholders. And I think one of the obviously side effects of this global pandemic is cyber attacks have increased massively. We've seen a huge increase of cyber attacks on businesses because people are more vulnerable. They're working from home, they're in that home mentality of clicking links and working in different ways, and it's getting a handle on those processes and how businesses work. And obviously attacks on third parties have been huge at the moment. We're seeing some of the attacks on organizations like SolarWinds that affect the US government, that affected Intel, but even down to smaller targeted accounts, like one of, I think it was Singapore Airlines, their loyalty program, one of their key IT vendors was attacked, and it was their data that was breached. And attacks on third parties are increasing all the time as well. But so what's the actual impact? If you look at all the different sort of stats around, 67% of CIOs think it's almost a given that their company will have a data breach or cyber attack. So it's making sure the policies and procedures are in place to combat against that the right people can only have access to the information at the right time. Over nearly 50% of all businesses in the UK have experienced at least one cyber attack in the last year. And if you look at some of the implications to that, British Airways, huge fine, 183 million for a data breach. Marriott was actually hit twice and fined nearly 100 million over a GDPR breach. Equifax, Dixon's, Carphone Warehouse, and the list goes on and on and on. For businesses not taking information and data security seriously and not protecting those critical assets within the business. Now, there's lots of different changes that have happened over the months, but there's also changes within businesses. But one of the key sort of questions that we got asked at one of the last webinars that we ran on this is ISO 27001 just for IT? And the answer is no. There's a lot of direct threats out there onto businesses. It might be that just your information security policy is not up to standard. It's not up to the required quality to make sure that information and data is secure. We've seen a lot of loosening of the human resource security, where people can print information, take it away, copy it, getting access control into different systems or into buildings itself. There's definitely a lack of encryption out there in the marketplace. And both that physical and operational environmental security needs to be addressed. And also there's been a lot of changes recently around how people communicate, whether that be on Teams calls, whether that be sharing information through links, whether that be putting information to platforms like LinkedIn or Outlook, or sharing information and sharing folders. A lot of that security has changed. These are all direct threats to information. Now, indirect threats is businesses are moving to that digital transformation that I spoke around earlier, that they're looking to buy new systems, to develop and get better maintenance. They're looking to improve their sort of supply relationships, and their supply relationships are also changing. New suppliers have been brought on. What threats do they pose to your data if you're sharing it with them? There's also around compliance and governance, obviously GDPR, Brexit, ISO 27001, PCI DSS, HIPAA, lots of different compliance areas that businesses need to be aware of to make sure they're meeting the required standards for their market. But also businesses have evolved and changed over time. Your business processes might be different to what they were 12 months ago. There's also operational changes. Do they meet the required standards for information and data security? Is that always at the forefront of mind? Is that data and information being protected and being looked after in the correct way? But there's also new opportunities, people moving into different market sectors, looking into new areas. And how do they make sure that their information is protected at all times? Now, there are options, and I'll cover a few more on the next sort of slide. But ISO 27001 is a full information security management system. It's very much dynamic and adapts to the way you work and do your business. The way we implement it, which I'll cover shortly, is around not asking you to change your process, but it's looking at the processes that you do and do they map into a framework that can be verified and continual improvements on it. But like I said right at the top of the presentation, it's not just IT. Only 37% of it relate to IT. It's making sure your business has the correct security policies, that the organization of information security assets is mapped, and that you know where the information is and who has access to it. It's also looking, obviously, human resource, it's looking at access control, cryptography, but it's also looking at the operational security. How does your business operate, and does it operate in a secure way? It's also about managing those supplier relationships, managing those third-party risk management. But then what happens if you have an incident? If the security is breached, if maybe a physical piece of information or an electronic piece of information is breached, how do you actually handle that? What is the process that you need to go through to make sure that you can do that? And then information security is part of a business continuity management, making sure that in the event of losing information or that there is a breach within the organization, that the business knows what they need to do and how they actually go about doing it to recover. And that will give your stakeholders, your customers, your suppliers, your partners, that sense of confidence that you're a business that can be there even if you are breached. And obviously we spoke around some of the amount of hacks and data previously. So it's making sure that the things are in place that if information and data is compromised, that you can actually continue to operate as a business. There are obviously other solutions. Cyber Essentials, to me, that is a simple checklist. It's a self-assessment. You go online or you can contract with a particular business who will help you fill out self-assessment. And it's really designed for the SME market space, for UK government and public sector. But it's not a management system. All it does, it gives the businesses that you deal with an assurance that you have thought about information and data security, and that you've gone through a checklist, you've looked at the stages within Cyber Essentials, and your business adheres to that standard. There is no external auditing, there is no check, it's purely self-assessment. Obviously, there's Cyber Essentials Plus or ISME Gold, where you do get that full independent review, things like a pen test to actually see if the infrastructure is resilient and can cope with a potential attack. But again, it's very much a static. It's not a management system, and it does have that limited recognition outside of the UK. So if you're dealing in the global market, the ISO standard 27001 is internationally recognized worldwide. But you may already have an information security management system. We deal with a lot of businesses that are in a variety of different stages of maturity before we engage with them around 27001 in terms of their information security policies and management systems. Some of them have a very comprehensive one, but others, it's pretty much informal, or it's a lot of the processes that they deal with information and data security is actually in their head. And it's very much ad hoc and done as not in a structured manner. Because what businesses need to do is need to make sure that you can identify all your information assets. And that's not just the electronic, it could be a paper-based asset, it could be blueprints, it could be documents, it could be contracts, it could be information that you have in a physical form, as well as obviously the electronic data that you will store on your customers, on your prospects, on your suppliers, etc. And it's about you need to identify those. Then what you need to look at is determine what threats. How can that information and data be accessed? What are the threats out there? Is it the threats of hackers? Is it the threats of your data needs to be encrypted? It could be a whole different area of it. Is it physical security? Then what you need to see where you're vulnerable to attacks, whether that be a physical attack or an electronic attack. You need to assess what that vulnerability is. And then look for the controls within inside ISO 27001, those 114 different control areas that we look at. And like I said, 37% of those are IT focused. The vast majority are physical and operational and processes around protecting your information. But it's looking for those controls and see where you map into them. And that's all part of the implementation process and how IMSM works. So why now? Looking at the vast numbers of customers that we have helped achieve ISO standards, whether that be 27001, 9001 for quality, 14001 environmental, 45001 health and safety, etc. It's really now is the time to show the world that your reputation and your brand can be protected, but it's based on your current performance, not necessarily on past history and case studies. That you've been checked, you've been audited, and you have thought about protecting your information and data assets. It's also about reducing staff-related security breaches, which you then get cost savings through reduction in incidents that happen within the business. Some of the costs for recovering from either physical attacks or electronic attacks, hacking, malware, things like that, can be absolutely huge. Some of the Ponemon Institute and the IBM study around data breaches say on average it's about 5.5 million to recover from the cost of a breach. And if a third party is involved, as in one of your suppliers or partners, then that can amplify that cost by a further 153,000. So it's looking about that cost saving through reduction in incidents, but obviously all about meeting compliance. But I think one of the key things and the major benefits of ISO 27001 is it providing those assurances to your stakeholders, your customers, your employees, and the market that you are a company that takes information and data security seriously. You have trusted processes and ways of working to protect it, that if they deal with you, you are thinking around their security of their information that they will share with you is front of mind. But we're also seeing businesses win more business because we've had customers come to us and say, since we've adopted ISO 27001, we've now started to win more contracts. It's not that businesses weren't engaging with us, they were. But the ones that required it as a standard were never even inviting them to tender for opportunities. They didn't even have a seat at the table. And they're seeing 13% more business. They're also seeing higher billing, around about an average of 7%. Now that could be a couple of different factors. Certain organizations, and I've worked for small companies that didn't have things like ISO 27001, which was mandated for a particular request for proposal or request for quotation. So I had to go through a third party that would take a cut of that business. So it was like almost like what we call margin stacking, where they was adding a little bit on and you wouldn't win the business because you were too expensive. But once you've got these particular standards in place, the likes of ISO 27001, then on average, the customers are seeing a 7% higher billing. And 85% of our customers are seeing immediate benefits from adopting standards like 27001. And it's not just from obviously getting involved more in projects, being invited to the table to bid for particular projects, getting better, enhanced reputation. It's about getting the business processes in place to make the operation of the business more streamlined. Bringing on new staff means that they know the policies and procedures because they're fully documented. They know how to handle information and data security. They know what to do in the event of a breach. They know around business continuity and how it can help in those elements as well. So it's about providing a better service to your customers. And like I said, it's time is the essence to show the world, you know, that you are a business that takes information and data security seriously, and that you have been independently assessed to actually do that as well. So why IMSM? You know, we have over 10,000 clients worldwide. We've delivered over 20,000 ISO certifications in consultancy projects. We operate in 17 different countries and have a full global reach. But we're a very simple company to do business with. We have a simple approach and a simple process of how we actually work with businesses. And it's really our sort of mantra is, you know, deliver high quality ISO consultancy all over the world globally and make it simple for businesses to work with IMSM. Now we have a very, again, we like the term simple, a simple 5-step approach. We operate a fixed fee structure. We don't charge on man days. We don't base our pricing on the turnover of your business. We operate purely on the amount of full-time employees that would interact with the management system. And that is a fixed fee. So regardless of how long it would take us to deliver that, how complex you are as a business, or how little information you've already got documented around information and data security, we will not invoice you any further. We'll give you a fixed fee so you can budget for that cost. What we also do is we can split those payments over 1/3 increments. We do a third typically at the signing of the contract, a third once we've done a gap analysis, and I'll cover how we implement shortly, and then the final third before we present you forward for certification. It's about being flexible for you as well. It's about fitting around your business. We're not going to come to you and say, you need to change the way you work. There may be elements of ISO 27001 where you need to implement new systems or new processes, but we will help you. It's about fitting around your business of how you work as an organization, but making sure that once we work with you, that it maps into the correct standard to make sure that you can get certified at the end of it. Our assessors are trained at the same level as the auditors that would come in and independently verify that you meet the required standards. And we assign a dedicated assessor to make sure we maintain continuity throughout the entire project. And we help build your processes into the ISO framework. And it's about just improving the system. But we also, and I think one of the key areas as well as the fixed fees, is we provide full implementation. We're not just going to send you a load of spreadsheets and a load of forms to fill in, and you end up doing all the heavy lifting and all the heavy work. We provide the full implementation service. And it's all about making sure that you get to that certification in a trouble-free manner and as quickly as possible. And our process, again, very simple. We do a gap analysis. We look at where you are now and what the ISO 27000 framework needs to be, and we see where the gaps are. We'll then help develop the manuals, help write up the processes, the flow charts, etc. The ones where you don't have a process, we can recommend processes for you. Other ones, we'll get those process information from you and build it into the plan. Now, a lot of the businesses we work with and some of the assessors that I've worked with that have gone out and done projects for me, you know, they're telling me a lot of the processes are actually in people's heads. And it's about getting that out of how they handle a particular area or one of the sections within ISO 27001, and getting that process out and then writing it and documenting it and building it into the framework. We will then develop the manuals and then present them to you to see if anything's changed since when we started the gap analysis to when we present the manuals, because businesses evolve, and sometimes, as we know now, businesses have to evolve incredibly quick. What we do then is we help you adopt that standard. We'll train an internal auditor to keep the systems up to date, to keep the management system in place. So as your business over the 12, 24, 36 months changes, that you can still maintain compliance and that you can still update and keep that information up to date. And then obviously it's the certification. Now, we can work with a company called QAS, who are an independent certification body. Or we can work with a UCAS approved body, URS, BSI, etc. These are external auditor companies, and then the certificate will then be issued once you meet the required standards. Now, it doesn't end there. What we can also then help you do is market that. We'll provide you with the logos so you can put it onto your website, but we've also got copywriters that can help do things like press releases and case studies so that you can start to get value out and get the message out to your customers, your suppliers, your stakeholders, that you have achieved the ISO 27001 standard. So I said this would only take about half an hour. So I think to finish and sort of sum up, you know, it is a dangerous world out there. Attacks are happening all the time on businesses. Cyber attacks are increasing at an exponential rate. And it's an unpredictable world out there, which we've seen with the global pandemic that we're unfortunately in. And it's about now making sure your information, your data is secure. Now, we can all say it's secure, but with standards like ISO 27001, it's proving it. And businesses now have even higher expectations of organizations. They're seeing the negative impact from data breaches and information security breaches, and they have high expectations, you know, just as you should of them. What you need to do is really show them that you're reliable, but also ask your suppliers, are you 27001 compliant? Do you meet the required standards to make sure the information I'm sharing with you is safe, that it's not going to be breached, that my customer data is not going to appear on a hacktivist list, that my information is secure, and ask them to return the favor. Make sure that they are doing the same as you. You know, we're operating in this new normal, probably an overused phrase, but it means change is happening even faster. You know, we don't know what's around the corner. We don't know what's going to actually happen, but what we can do is make sure we're prepared. And it means make sure that you've got your information and data is secure, that the right people have access to that information at the right time, and that it can't be breached, and that it can't be lost out there in the market, that can't affect your reputation, your brand, and your business. Before we go on to the questions, just like to say what we can offer. I've got a free ISO 27001 guide, which goes through all the different elements of ISO 27001. We also can offer a free impact consultancy review and report. My contact details are on there. I'll obviously forward this slide deck on to everyone that attended this webinar with my contact details. You know, feel free to reach out to me if you do have any questions that maybe you don't want to ask within this forum. And also, please, you know, visit the IMSM website, and you can sign up for new updates and events, or connect with us on LinkedIn and follow us on there. We announce a lot of our events on LinkedIn, which I think quite a few people here have actually joined through there. So what I'll do is now is I'll open up to the questions and have a quick look and see if anyone's got any questions. Right, one of the questions is, what is the most important asset of your company regarding your opinion? The IT infrastructure, the IT structure of the company, the customer's data, or the employees' data? Really, really good question. It's a difficult one to answer. I'd say almost they're all equally as important. Now, I know that I think it was one of the hotel, no, it was GE. GE had a breach through one of its third-party suppliers that provided their HR, and actually had, I think it was 200,000 of their employees' data leaked. Now, that affected them from a huge negative publicity. It also affected, I believe, their ability to take on new staff. Because if I'm joining an organization, I want to know as an employee, because that's probably the most important thing to me, that the details I share with my company are protected. You know, because they will know my national insurance number, my bank details, my date of birth, my marital status, who my dependents are, my pension details, everything like that. So employees and protecting that is key. But I think a lot of organizations can be decimated by losing their customer data. The loss of their, or the damage to their reputation as being a safe business to work with can be just destroyed overnight. And there's been numerous cases of businesses losing 30, 40, 50% of their revenues after being breached through a company that has lost customer data. So I think that it's very, very hard to say. If you are a retail organization that is in a very competitive marketplace and your customer data is breached and those customers move to your supplier, that will have a far, far bigger impact to you as a business than losing your employees' data. Now, I know that's kind of a tough thing to say, but it would be. But other organizations where employee confidentiality is very, very important to them, maybe in a research, in pharmaceutical, losing your employee data can have a far more detrimental effect on it. So I suppose in a long-winded answer, that equal is important, but it also depends on the industry that you're working in. But really good question, and thank you very much for that. I don't think there are any more questions. I'm certainly not seeing anything pop up. But if there are any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I will send a copy of the slide deck to everyone that's attended today's webinar. It's got my full contact details in it. Feel free to reach out to me and contact me by email or by phone, and I'll endeavour to help as much as I possibly can. So I'd just like to say thank you very much for turning up, and really appreciate your time, and I hope you found the content was useful and informative. And if you do have any feedback, again, please send me an email or feel free to drop me a call. So once again, thank you very much. I'd now like to draw the webinar to a close. Thank you.